Okay. Well, first of all, happy Tuesday. It's August. Depending on where you are in the country, it's hot. I'm in Florida, so it's scorching. So hope everyone's having a good Tuesday. Thanks so much for hopping on this session. And my name is Luke Robinson, and I'm a business advisor here at Collective. And Collective essentially is your all-in-one solution, your back office solution for your small business. We'll handle the whole shebang. When it comes to business formation, bookkeeping, payroll, tax filing, pretty much the whole shebang. But today we have a fun session we like to call Tax Tuesday. And Tax Tuesday is essentially just an AMA session. It's an Ask Me Anything session surrounding taxes, best business practices, um, what sort of entity should I set up? What state should I set it up in? Questions like that. Anyone that has any burning tax questions, feel free to throw them at me. And also, it's important to note, though, too, that this is just information. Don't consider it tax advice. Don't consider it legal advice. It's neither. This is just information. The tax code is really complex. Some of these things that I could be saying could be wrong or outdated. I could be mistaken on a lot of this stuff. So, well, not a lot of it, but I could be mistaken on some of it. And it's a good idea, to speak to a tax attorney or a CPA or a professional like that before you kind of go forward with this information. But now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and jump right into it. We've already got some great questions. Oh, okay. What are the two ways you get paid with an S corp? It's an excellent question. And essentially, what happens with an S corp? And let's back up. Let's kind of define what an S corp is. An S corp is a tax election. It's a way to ask the federal government how to tax your business. So, you have to have an LLC set up before you can even make an S corp election with the Internal Revenue Service. So just wanted to clarify that. A lot of people have kind of they have a misrepresentation on, they think that the S corp is a business entity, that it's a corporation or something like that, but it's not. It's a tax election. And what happens with an S corp election is you pay yourself as an employee. Long story short, you become a W-2 employee of your own business, of your own LLC or operation. And now that you're an employee, it triggers payroll requirements. Essentially, you will be on payroll. You'll be on a paycheck with this new tax structure. So how it works is with an S corp, you can kind of think of your earnings in two buckets almost. That's how I like to explain it. In one bucket, you have your W-2 salary. A portion of your earnings will be considered paycheck, W-2 salary. Then the other part of your earnings, or the second way that you get paid, is via distributions. That's technically what they're called. And some people will use the term dividends when they're talking about distributions. Conceptually speaking, you can kind of think of them that way. But that's the second way how you get paid. And how you take a distribution is you simply transfer it to yourself. You transfer money from your business bank account to your personal bank account. And that's how you take a distribution. Now, your paycheck, that typically needs to be done, via a payroll processor. It needs to run some sort of through some sort of technology that'll file, all the payroll tax returns, transmit the taxes to the state and the feds, all that good stuff. And if you were to come on board with Collective, the payroll side of things is included. We'd handle that for you. What exactly is reasonable compensation? That's a great question, because it's an important question as well, because in terms of a compliance context, it could really get you into trouble with an S corp if you don't pay yourself a reasonable salary. And let's dive into that. What does the IRS mean when they say reasonable compensation? Well, it's a good question, because they don't give you an objective definition. Like, there is no set objective standard to how to determine what is a reasonable salary. So a tax professional can help you pick a number. And essentially, they'll do, or they should be doing, some sort of salary analysis, like determining how much money your business makes in total, where you're from in the country, what sort of industry are you in, how many years of experience do you have, and all of that. All of that information goes into an appropriate salary analysis. But just kind of as a good rule of thumb, salaries tend to end up, and again, before I say this is the rule of thumb, like, it's not objective, but salaries, in my experience, tend to end up between 40 and 60% of someone's net income. Now, and when I say net income, I mean, after your expenses, after you pay additional contractors or anything like that. Um, so that's how that works. Do all great Oh, this is a very interesting question. Do all great companies start off as an S corp? Not necessarily, no. No, I mean, there are certain situations to where you might not wanna jump right into the S corp election route, and some of those situations include if you're not making enough money, that's a big one. If you're making under a certain income amount, then the amount that you could, potentially save from the S corp in taxes might not even cover the additional administrative costs that you have along with S corps, like payroll cost, paying a tax professional, things like that. So, not necessarily, especially when some companies are just starting off and they're not sure how much they're going to make. They don't necessarily go the S corp route right away. So, it's not a requirement, to build a great company. It's not a requirement to start an S corp right away. You can still build a great company with, going the LLC route first and then transitioning it into an S corp. But even if you have a new company and you're, relatively sure that you're going to, do pretty well financially, and what we say here is over $60,000 net income in a 12-month time period. If you expect to at least make that much money, that's when we say an S corp becomes worth it, becomes financially advantageous. If you're making below that much, then, it might be time to, at least consider it and hold off until you get to an appropriate income level. What's the most traditional route for an entrepreneur in terms of LLC formations? Ooh, well, traditional, I mean, it kind of depends on what time frame you're talking about. Because traditionally, like back in the day, I think people would probably use attorneys. They'd use an attorney to go set up an LLC or set up a business. Nowadays, that's not quite as necessary. You know, LLC formations is pretty straightforward, and typically you can do it yourself via a place like LegalZoom or something like that. If you only need an LLC, if you need an LLC with an S corp election, a place like Collective would be a good start in forming an LLC. We'd do that for you if you came on board with us. We'd form your LLC and then we'd make an S corp election with the IRS. So I guess I would say two things. If you need an S corp election, Collective, of course. If right now you only need an LLC, I would go someplace like LegalZoom or a place like that that could set it up for you online. Oh, this is a good one too. So many good questions. You guys are so smart. It's summertime. Should I even worry about taxes? You should definitely worry about taxes just as much as, when April 15th is approaching, the tax filing deadline. And the reason that is, especially if you're self-employed, the reason you want to worry about taxes is because you need to ensure that you're paying taxes throughout the year. So when you're self-employed, usually you have requirements called quarterly estimated tax deposits, and it's essentially how when you estimate your taxes quarterly and literally estimate them and pay them over to the government to ensure that you don't have a huge surprise tax bill at the end of the year when you go and you file your return. Because when you're a W 2 employee, and when you're working for somebody else, then taxes are already being or should already be taken out of your paycheck and paid to the government, paid to the IRS and to the state. So, usually people with W 2 situations don't end up as many tax problems because they have the money's automatically taken out to them and paid to the government. So they don't have a big tax bill at the end of the year. But when you're self-employed, that's your responsibility to do. You know, it's your responsibility to, I guess, keep the finances organized, make sure to make sure you know exactly how much you've made at any given time, and be able to accurately calculate taxes based on that. And that can be, pretty complicated in certain situations. So, but yes, like during the summer, that's something you should really be focusing on, and and making sure that you're at least paying your taxes. And kind of secondary to that is accounting and bookkeeping. That's really important to keep organized throughout the summer, because really the only way that you know how to calculate your estimated tax deposit and all that jazz is if you accurately know your net income. If you have your um, income and expenses in line, it's hard to even estimate your taxes if you don't know how much you've made. Okay, I think we have a question coming in as we speak. Oh, I have no business bank account and don't qualify for one. What should I do? Well, there's a couple perspectives here, because the thing is, really, in a tax perspective, technically, even if you have an LLC, it's technically still possible to, you know, handle your bookkeeping, handle your tax payments, handle it, even if you do business out of a personal account. Because let's say that you set up a separate personal account, specifically for your business. That makes it pretty simple and straightforward to handle the accounting and taxes and everything like that. But the thing is that that's the tax perspective. But you also have to consider the legal perspective too when you do this. And before I say this, I'm not an attorney, so don't, of course, don't consider this legal advice. But the entire point, or one of the points of an LLC, is to separate your business and personal finances, completely and utterly. And the reason you want to do that is because, and you want to maintain an appearance of separation. And the reason that you want to do that is because, let's say that if you ever go to court, or someone sues you or whatnot, sues your business or whatnot, if it doesn't appear that you're keeping things separate, like if you have no financial separation, or this business doesn't appear as it's being run like a business, then the judge might disallow your liability protections in certain scenarios, because you're supposed to, keep records, keep separations, and if you're not doing that, the judge might say, well, they can go after your personal assets because you haven't kept things separate. Ooh, how can you go about dissolving a business partnership if you still want to keep the business? Hmm. Well, I mean, technically, I believe, like, if you have a partnership, essentially what that is that's a multi-member LLC. So that's when two or more people are on an LLC. That's what a partnership is. That's what it means. So technically, what you can do, I mean, you can you can do one of two things. You'd probably want to amend your operating agreement and articles of organization to remove a partner in the business. And usually that requires signatures from the partner and from you. It requires a filing with the state, your Secretary of State's office. So that's one thing you want to do. And once you do that, then you're then you kind of go back to a single member LLC or something like that, then you probably would want to file tax entity election changes with the Internal Revenue Service. Some sort of form that will have you considered um, a disregarded entity again. So you're not, because you don't now, when you're a partnership, there's a specific partnership return you got to file. There's all these things you got to do. So those two things I think are important to keep in mind. Now, also, there's some people that just dissolve the entire thing and start a new business. Sometimes that's easier. If you leave a business partnership, can you still use the business banking history for other things? Proof of income, etc. Oh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say probably not, because the thing is, I mean, it depends on the context and why you're providing these documentations. But if because usually, like, when you go and you get loans, business banking history, you apply for credit, it's because you're proving future income. So the reason that you're bringing this historical data from the business is you're saying, okay, I can, prove that I'm going to continue to make this much money. But the thing, if you've left a partnership, then those records might be less advantageous, because you've left the partnership, and that tells the bank that you aren't that you're less likely to make that money in the future. So they're less likely to give you a loan. Can a nonprofit organization be an S corp? No, it can't be, and there's not really a reason why it should be, because the only reason why you'd want to be or the big reason why people make an S corp election is to save on the self employment tax, and nonprofits don't pay self employment tax, or they're not pass through entities or anything like that. So no, usually they don't need an S corp, or they can't have an S corp election. Okay. All right. Can a partnership make an S corp election? Yes, it can. A partnership can be an S corp, and like I said earlier, a partnership is essentially just an LLC with two or more people on it. That's what a partnership is, and that business entity itself can file the S corp paperwork forms with the IRS, with the Internal Revenue Service. So that's definitely still possible. But you would still, like, when you have that, you'd probably want to have some sort of partnership agreement that outlined, how much salary will the partners be paying, ownership structure, who owns what, and so on and so forth. What are the most successful S corp structures you've seen? Well, really, some of the most S corp successful S corp structures I've seen have been, the more kind of straightforward LLC with an S corp S election structure. The consultant type, someone that has, pretty, relatively simple books, but are making good money. That's making $150,000, $200,000. That sort of professional is just sort of prime for the S corp election. It's just typically really good for it. Okay. Another question coming in right now. Oh, how do you start off getting clients for your business? Honestly, the best advice I can give to that, or the best answer I can give to that question. And this might not be possible. Sometimes you want to jump right into it, but Usually, before you start a business, it's good to work a job in that industry. So, literally a W-2 job for someone else. And the reason I say that is because there is just so many when you start a business up, there are so many things to learn. Uh, and it's overwhelming. And don't get me wrong, it can be done. You can start a business with no experience and, piece by piece, build your experience, trial and error, things like that. But that is extremely complicated. And sometimes it's good to have, at least a year under your belt in whatever industry that you want to start a business in. That's the best advice you can get to that. Because once you do that, once you watch, your existing company that you're working for, once you watch how they get clients, how they run the aspects of the business, it's so much easier to figure out what you need to do for your own. Oh, what's the most important aspect of entrepreneurship? Hands down, by far, your level of grit. That's it. You don't have to be the most intelligent to be a successful entrepreneur. You don't have to be the most knowledgeable. You don't have to be the most credentialed. You don't need 5 degrees. You don't need like as my dad would say, this person has more degrees than a thermometer. You don't need to be that. An entrepreneur can be someone without a lick of college, with anything like that. So the most important, and I've seen extremely intelligent people fail at business because they don't have grit. If you don't have resilience and the mindset to keep going for long periods of time without success, you will not make it in business in any meaningful way. Business is literally just a progression of failure, 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 and a big success. Failure, 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 and a big success. If you can do that all, if you can do that over and over again for years, you will be successful. What should you do if, oh, this is a great question. What should you do if nobody believes in your business? You should realize that it will be that much sweeter when you make it work. You know, things, in my opinion, like challenges, things that are really hard are even more satisfying once you accomplish them if no one believes in you, or if no one thinks that you can do it, or if someone thinks that your idea is silly or whatnot. Don't get me wrong, support is great. From our family, from our friends, support, drives a lot of us forward. But if it's not there, you got to do what you got to do. And the plus of it not being there is that your success will be sweeter. It certainly will be. If you if you're there's value in being the only person that can see something. That can is the only person that can see the potential for something and the only person willing to take a risk on it. And if you do that and it works out, it feels really good. Long story short. Here's an interesting question. What S corp companies and collective have you seen the most success? Hmm. I would say, and again, this and kind of piggybacking on what I said earlier, is I see a lot of success for people that gain some knowledge before starting the business. You know, a lot of the professionals that I've spoke to that have started businesses and have become successful at it have one of two things has happened. They've worked in an industry as a W-2 employee, and one of two things happened. Either they got laid off and they kind of fell into business accidentally by getting laid off, consulting a little bit while they're looking for their next job, and realizing that they can do this, and realizing that they can make more money in consulting than they can in their regular W-2 job. And instead of going forth and finding another W-2 job, they run with this side hustle and they turn it into a business. So that's one thing, is when people get laid off and they turn it into, and they spend it into gold. And the other thing is when they just get tired of the W-2 grind. You know, they get tired of working for someone else, and they just think, you know what, I'm gonna try it out myself. Those are the two situations where I see most success, and just it's worth pointing out that both those situations involve getting some experience out in the market before you start your business. That's the best advice that I could give. All right. Okay, here's the interesting. Ooh, this is a very interesting question. I do mukbang food content. Can I write off the food that I record myself eating online? No, probably not. And the thing is, you're only supposed to write off things that are in existence, that are only happening because you're running a business. Meaning that if that business did not exist, and this action or whatever you're doing would also not exist. Eating does not fit that category. So even if you're filming yourself eating and monetizing it, that meal is not a business expense because you would have had to eat anyway. You're not buying that. The business is just a secondary thing from this action. The reason that you bought that food is to eat and to survive, not to have a business. That's the primary reason. So, and therefore, probably not. You shouldn't. You probably the IRS would probably not allow you to write that off. But that is all the time that I have this glorious Tuesday. I actually have to go and speak to a prospective collective member, but I enjoyed it so much, like I do every week. And all of you asked excellent, intelligent questions. And if you thought this was valuable, or you'd like to speak, with someone a little bit more about the S corp or about what collective could do for you, schedule a call. Go to our website, schedule an intro call with an advisor, reach out to us on social media, and we'd be more than happy to have a conversation.